evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. President Biden today giving remarks on the chaos unfolding in Afghanistan. He defends his decision to withdraw troops, saying an indefinite war is unacceptable. The U.S. Embassy is safely closed, and right now U.S. forces are focused on evacuating American citizens and Afghan refugees. Bloodshed at the airport in Afghanistan's capital. U.S. troops returned fire and killed 2 armed individuals as thousands try to flee the country amid the Taliban takeover. And NTD speaks with a retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army who completed 4 tours in Afghanistan. He shares his perspective on the chaos unfolding there. The nation's food stamp program to receive the biggest permanent increase in history. How much more will people get per month, and how much will it cost the taxpayer? Tesla's stock fell 4.5% on Monday as U.S. auto safety regulators open a formal probe into the company's Autopilot system. This is after a series of crashes involving Tesla cars and parked first responder vehicles. President Biden today defends his decision to withdraw U.S. troops from Afghanistan. He says the goal of the U.S. involvement in the war was to protect America from terrorism, not to help Afghanistan with democracy creation or nation building. And he says it's not right to ask American troops to bear the brunt of the fighting, especially when Afghan leaders have now fled themselves. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has the latest on the president's remarks.
President Biden's the 4th U.S. president to deal with the war in Afghanistan. Today at the White House, the president defended his decision to pull out U.S. troops.
I've argued for many years that our mission should be narrowly focused on counterterrorism, not counterinsurgency or nation building, in a conflict that is not in the national interest of the United States, of doubling down on a civil war in a foreign country, of attempting to remake a country through the endless military deployments of U.S. forces.
Biden says now the U.S. needs to redirect resources to combating terrorist threats from elsewhere, such as ISIS in Syria and Iraq, Africa, and Asia. For now, the U.S. will use over-the-horizon or off-the-shores and out-of-sight techniques to keep an eye on terrorist threats, including from the Taliban.
And our true strategic competitors, China and Russia, would love nothing more than the United States to continue to funnel billions of dollars in resources and attention into stabilizing Afghanistan indefinitely.
When he took office, Biden inherited a Trump-era agreement to withdraw U.S. forces by this summer. Biden says this left him with only 2 choices: withdraw or revamp the conflict and send more U.S. troops back to fight for an indefinite period of time.
How many more lives, American lives, is it worth? How many endless rows of headstones at Arlington National Cemetery? I'm clear on my answer. I will not repeat the mistakes we've made in the past. Mistake of staying and fighting indefinitely.
He says America has already dedicated so many resources, troops, and over $1 trillion to help the Afghan government stabilize their nation. But he still didn't expect the army to fall this quick.
The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. So what's happened? Afghanistan political leaders gave up and fled the country. The Afghan military collapsed, sometime without trying to fight. If anything, the developments of the past week reinforced that ending U.S. military involvement in Afghanistan now was the right decision. American troops cannot and should not be fighting in a war and dying in a war that Afghan forces are not willing to fight for themselves.
Right now, U.S. forces are working to evacuate Afghan allies and refugees. Biden says the U.S. made it clear to the Taliban that if they disrupt this rescue mission, the U.S. will respond with devastating force if necessary. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
As Taliban forces swarm the Afghan capital, residents of Kabul are attempting to flee the city. Thousands have jammed Kabul airport, where gunfire erupted, adding to the chaos. And just a warning, some viewers may find the following footage disturbing due to its graphic nature.
The Taliban captured the Afghan capital of Kabul on Sunday, entered the presidential palace and took down the Afghan flag inside. The militants declared victory in the 20-year war and announced they will establish the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan very soon. Al Jazeera obtained exclusive footage of the Taliban in the presidential palace.
What you are looking at right now is Taliban fighters inside the presidential palace. This is these pictures exclusive on Al Jazeera.
The militant group seized 10 provincial capitals in a single week, while U.S. forces completed their withdrawal from the country. Taliban met no opposition on their way to the capital. That's despite the Pentagon having spent $830 billion on training for Afghan government forces and on reconstruction projects.
Dear viewers, as you can see, we are standing in the heart of the city at Ansari Plaza. The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan now has control over here.
The president of Afghanistan fled the country on Sunday. He said it was to avoid bloodshed. And a delegation of Afghan government leaders arrived in Pakistan on Monday. But the mayor of Kabul is staying.
Yes, I'm still the mayor of Kabul. I was in touch with the leadership of the Taliban yesterday and today, and they want us to continue our job and provide our much-needed service to the city of 5 million people.
Chaos erupted at the Kabul airport on Monday as thousands of residents tried to flee on board foreign military planes. The Taliban fired shots to disperse the crowd, and at least 5 people were killed. But it's unclear whether they died from the gunfire or in the ensuing stampede.
We are here because we are jobless. We left our homes as we have no food.
For me, I'm afraid of these things. First of all, my life, because things can happen here. Everything, it's like they are unpredictable at all. And people knows the nature of the Taliban and what is happening in Afghanistan.
An Afghan refugee in France, who used to help U.S. forces as an interpreter, fears that the Taliban will punish his family members who are still in Afghanistan.
To kill children, to kill innocent people, to kill elders, to kill leaders, to kill your parents in front of you. Beat them to death. Cutting hands. Even you, I've seen cutting hands, and I've seen it really clearly when I was a child.
Online videos also show people clinging onto foreign military planes and falling to their deaths. U.S. forces had to halt evacuation plans due to the chaos at the Kabul airport.
American troops at the airport in Kabul have taken fire and were forced to shoot back, killing armed individuals. This comes as the Secretary of State speaks with China's foreign minister about safely evacuating U.S. citizens and vulnerable Afghans. NTD's Kevin Hogan brings us more on the Pentagon's actions.
The Pentagon says its mission is to secure the airport in Kabul. A general says there are 2,500 troops at the airport, and they expect nearly 3,500 troops to be there by the end of the day on Monday.
Shortly thereafter, the first C-17 landed with U.S. Marines on board, and the next C-17 is preparing to land as we speak, with members of the 82nd Airborne Division.
U.S. soldiers deployed at the Kabul airport were shot at. Afterwards, they returned fire and killed 2 armed individuals in separate incidents. With chaos at the airport unfolding on Monday, U.S. forces were working with Turkish and international troops to clear the airport so the evacuation could proceed. What's more, the Pentagon confirmed that it will open 2 more facilities to house evacuated Afghans who are at risk following the Taliban takeover.
U.S. NORTHCOM and the U.S. Army are working to create additional capacity to support refugee relocation in the U.S., including temporary sites under assessment at Fort Bliss, Texas, and Camp McCoy, Wisconsin.
These, combined with Fort Lee in Virginia, are expected to house up to 22,000 Afghans in about 4 weeks. Furthermore, the State Department has called on officials in Afghanistan to keep border crossings, roads, and airports open. That's so citizens can flee the country if they choose. State Secretary Antony Blinken, meanwhile, spoke with China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. He spoke to them about bringing U.S. citizens and vulnerable Afghans to safety. The State Department said by Tuesday it expects the U.S. troop presence at the Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul to swell to about 6,000. Their focus will be to take over air traffic control and facilitate the efforts to evacuate thousands of U.S. citizens as well as embassy staff. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
The shocking videos of Afghans clinging to a U.S. military cargo plane has prompted questions from people all over the world. NTD's Steve Lance spoke with a retired Army officer who completed 4 tours in Afghanistan to get his take on this unfolding situation.
This wasn't just a war for the American troops who are on the front lines of battle in Afghanistan. Although nearly 2,500 U.S. troops paid the ultimate sacrifice and died, much of the past 20 years in Afghanistan was spent securing and, for what the soldiers thought, building a better nation for the Afghan people.
And one of those jobs I actually had the strategic planner portion, got to oversee a lot of not only the future planning for about 18-month outlook to the country, but we were also responsible for the base closures and reductions across the country as the drawdown really started to pick up some steam.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gobb understands the situation in Afghanistan better than most, completing 4 tours of duty in the country.
I did 4 tours between 2003 and 2013, and that's 2 of them were up in Bagram to the north, with one of those split between Bagram and Salerno, which is a little ways to the southeast. And then I did 2 tours in Kandahar, which is way down to the south, in the more desert region.
Now, the pictures and videos of what has happened in Afghanistan just recently speak for themselves. But we do know that President Trump also wanted to withdraw troops on a similar timetable as President Biden. So we asked Lieutenant Colonel Gobb if he thought there could have been a different approach.
One of the things we use in the military is we say that we don't necessarily always put a timeline, a very specific date to something that we're doing. We do things based on the conditions on the ground. And that's really one of the things that President Trump had put in place, was a series of conditions that had to be met in order for us to complete our drawdown and complete removal from the country, with the exception of very few people and some specific things.
Lieutenant Colonel Gobb went on to tell us just how disappointed he and his fellow military veterans are with the way things have turned out in Afghanistan, especially after so much bloodshed and treasure has been lost there, and that he does wish that the Biden administration could have completed this final mission with a little bit more grace. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Steve Lance, NTD News.
World leaders are responding to the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan. NTD's Arian Pazdar has a summary of their reactions.
The Secretary General of the United Nations addressed the Security Council on Monday regarding human rights violations by the Taliban.
I call upon the Taliban and all parties to respect and protect international humanitarian law and the rights and freedoms of all persons.
The UN has over 3,000 staff on the ground in Afghanistan. Some of them have been relocated to Kabul, but none have been evacuated. More than 60 countries, including the US, issued a joint statement saying anyone who wants to leave Afghanistan must be allowed to depart. Airports and border crossings must remain open. The British Foreign Secretary says the Taliban must be held accountable.
Make very clear to the Taliban that we will hold them to account for their commitment and never to allow Afghanistan to be used as a base for terror.
He added that the UK might apply sanctions and withhold funds. German Chancellor Angela Merkel says Germany must urgently evacuate up to 10,000 people from Afghanistan that her country has responsibility for. 6 years ago, Merkel opened Germany's borders during a so-called migration crisis. More than 1 million migrants entered the country. On Monday, she said Berlin should cooperate with countries bordering Afghanistan to support those fleeing. Germany's neighbor, Austria, however, insisted that it plans to keep deporting illegal immigrants back to Afghanistan, even as the Taliban seized Kabul. And Austria also recommended deportation centers in the region around Afghanistan. Meanwhile, a number of countries, including the UK, Italy and Turkey, are evacuating their citizens from Afghanistan and bringing their diplomatic staff back home. Russia, however, will keep its embassy in Kabul operating. They set up working contacts with representatives of the Taliban and said the situation in Kabul was stabilizing. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
And in other news, a historic permanent increase in food stamp benefits is on the way. Today, the Biden administration said average monthly benefits will increase more than 25% compared to before the pandemic. NTD's Arlene Richards reports.
The Biden administration is giving food stamps the biggest permanent increase in history. The USDA has re-evaluated the Thrifty Food Plan and has decided to increase the average benefit per month by $36 per person from $121.
We've seen for years and years that the existing level of benefits was not sufficient, was running out for people by the second week. And we've known for decades that the Thrifty Food Plan is based on an outmoded methodology.
CEO of Vermont Food Bank John Sales says he's excited the USDA has reviewed and updated the previous program. He serves people directly almost every day and sees them struggling to put food on the table.
I don't think it's going to solve the hunger or housing issue for everyone in this country. And only really the federal government and some state governments have the resources to invest at this magnitude. Charity is just a small sliver.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture, or USDA, made the plan by evaluating 4 key factors: current food prices, what Americans typically eat, dietary guidance, and the nutrients in food items. They used updated purchasing data collected from stores as opposed to data self-reported by households. However, some see downsides to the plan.
The federal government is not paying enough attention to or is not concerned enough about the inflationary pressure. We all know that we've now had 2 months over 5% inflation, which is the highest in decades.
Fergus Hodgson is a research associate with the Frontier Center for Public Policy. He believes this policy is a bad idea, that it will prevent people from being independent.
We want a booming economy to be lifting people out of this trap, to not be dependent on this, to not be institutionalized such that they don't know how to take care of themselves. To say that we're going to expand this program is the exact opposite of a healthy economy.
The plan is projected to cost an additional $20 billion per year. There are an estimated 42 million people in the program, and they will start receiving the increased funds on October 1st, 1.5 months from now. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
A dozen major U.S. oil industry groups are suing the Biden administration for halting drilling auctions on federal lands and waters. The groups argue that by law, the government is required to hold regular sales. NTD's Grace Coulter has the story.
The American Petroleum Institute, or API, along with 11 other oil industry groups, filed a lawsuit against the Biden administration in a Louisiana federal court Monday. The suit seeks to compel the U.S. Department of Interior to reinstate the lease sales of federal lands and waters and calls the length of the pause unprecedented. On the campaign trail, President Joe Biden vowed to stop issuing new leases to oil and gas companies in an effort to combat climate change. His administration swiftly paused drilling auctions in January, pending a review of the program's value to taxpayers and environmental impacts. Since then, the administration's been sued several times by oil-producing states and industry groups for loss of jobs and revenue. API Chief Legal Officer Paul Afonso said in a statement Monday, "The law is clear. The department must hold lease sales and provide a justification for significant policy changes. They have yet to meet these requirements in the 8 months since instituting a federal leasing pause." A review of the pause, which formally began in March, was expected to be concluded by now. The Interior Secretary said late July that it was coming very soon. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
Over the weekend, the Texas Supreme Court temporarily blocked mask mandates in 2 of the state's most populous counties. The counties were defying the governor's order by imposing the requirement. Here are the details.
The Texas Supreme Court on Sunday granted an emergency stay to Governor Greg Abbott, blocking mask mandates imposed by Dallas and Bexar counties. The stay overrides lower court rulings that allowed the counties to temporarily impose the mandates locally, despite Abbott's order barring government entities and officials from doing so. Abbott has said that the order allows Texans to rely on personal responsibility rather than government mandates. However, local officials in Dallas and Bexar counties cited pressure on hospitals amid rising virus cases as justification for the mask mandates. Following the Sunday ruling, Abbott emphasized that his order doesn't prohibit using masks, saying on Twitter, anyone who wants to wear a mask can do so, including in schools. State Attorney General Ken Paxton responded to the news on Twitter saying, "Let this ruling serve as a reminder to all independent school districts and local officials that the governor's order stands." But according to the Texas Tribune, Dallas and Bexar County officials and school districts still plan to continue mandating masks, defying the governor's order. Since the Supreme Court's hold is temporary, the case will continue to be heard in lower courts. A hearing for Bexar County is scheduled for Monday, while Dallas County's has been set for August 24th. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
Auto safety regulators said on Monday they have opened a formal safety probe into Tesla's automatic driving system. Over 765,000 U.S. vehicles built since 2014 will be evaluated after a series of crashes involving emergency vehicles.
Tesla's Autopilot is under federal investigation following a history of crashes. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration said it had identified 11 crashes involving Tesla cars and first responder emergency vehicles since 2018. Tesla shares fell nearly 4.5% after the probe was announced on Monday. The Auto Safety Agency reported 17 injuries and 1 death in those crashes. This includes the December 2019 crash of a Tesla Model 3 that left a passenger dead after the vehicle collided with a parked fire truck in Indiana. Following the July 10th crash in San Diego, the agency has opened a preliminary evaluation of Autopilot in Tesla models Y, X, S, and 3 built after 2014. CEO Elon Musk has repeatedly defended Autopilot. In April, he tweeted that Tesla with Autopilot engaged now approaches 10 times lower chance of accident than average vehicle. The Auto Safety Agency can choose to take no action, or it can demand a recall, which might impose limits on how, when, and where Autopilot operates. Any restrictions could narrow the competition between Tesla's system and other automakers' driver assistance systems. Tesla did not immediately respond to a request for comment.
Coming up, a rally to protest New York City's vaccine passport strategy. The Big Apple will be the first city in the country to require proof of vaccination to eat indoors. And top Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer urges a federal clampdown on fake vaccination cards. These cards are shipped from overseas and are being sold across the country. New Yorkers are rallying against the city's vaccine passport strategy again. Starting tomorrow, they're supposed to show proof of vaccination to eat indoors, go to the gym, and watch movies. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more from Manhattan.
Why are you guys putting on your mask? It's outside. It's hot outside. These rallygoers are saying they want medical freedom from New York's City Hall right through the Brooklyn Bridge.
And what we stand for is medical freedom, no medical apartheid, and no medical passports.
New York City is introducing its own COVID vaccine passport strategy starting Tuesday, making them the first city in the country to do this.
Since we made that announcement, we see our approach being emulated around the country in New Orleans, San Francisco, other places. New York City, once again, leading the way, showing that we can make a difference in fighting Delta through vaccination.
The city has confirmed that dozens of businesses have already implemented their Key to NYC policy. But according to the mayor, they won't enforce it until mid-September. This man told us de Blasio should rethink his policy because the choice to vaccinate belongs to the people. Were you vaccinated?
Yes, I was.
Again, that was a personal choice. But I have family members of mine who passed away from this virus. And I got some family members of mine who's totally against it. But I have to respect their choice.
There's so much insanity happening right now. If I remember correctly, we still live in America, and I don't know where the freedoms are. COVID is absolutely real. Anyone who says it's not, that's not true. It's real. I know people impacted. However, the fear-mongering by the media is absolutely insane.
We had the same problem with the flu, and everybody was taking the flu shot. It's a money game. Now people stop taking the flu shot, so now you have to take the vaccination shot. I don't understand.
And now Mayor Bill de Blasio says that this is how they're going to fight the Delta variant. I mean, what's your response to that?
It's a loaded question, hon. To keep it nice, I think it's hyped up. Do I believe that this virus is real? Yes, so is the flu. But, you know, when you have flip-flop bocce, wear a mask, don't wear a mask, get the vaccine. The kids are safer in school now. You can't go to school. If you're vaccinated, you must wear a mask to protect other people. Protect other people. I thought the vaccination worked. People need to stay awake, do their own research, talk to their doctors, make their own conclusion. This man over there, okay, who I refer to as Warren Wilhelm, where did he get his medical degree? Where did he get his medical degree to mandate people to get a jab?
Susan Ann Miller says they have medical freedom rallies every Monday at noon. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
As many cities are about to roll out the vaccine passport system, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is issuing warnings about counterfeit vaccine cards. These cards are being sold across the country. Schumer says it's illegal to buy or sell fake vaccine cards.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said Sunday that the federal government needs to crack down on fake COVID-19 vaccination cards. The top Democrat spoke at a news conference in New York.
Some people are paying money for a fake card and risking prosecution because it's against the law. Who could be that dumb? Who could be that dumb? The vaccine's free, the vaccine's safe. Get the vaccine.
Schumer is pushing for Customs and Border Protection to clamp down on counterfeit cards sent from overseas. He also calls for a federal campaign to educate the public that it's against the law to sell or buy a fake card. Last week, U.S. border agents in Memphis, Tennessee announced they had seized hundreds of fabricated vaccine cards, all shipped from the Chinese city of Shenzhen. The FBI issued a joint statement in March with the Department of Health and Human Services, urging people not to buy, create, or sell fake vaccine cards. Violators will face a fine and up to 5 years in prison. Schumer's announcement comes as several cities are moving to roll out the vaccine passport system, including New York City, San Francisco, and Los Angeles.
Coming up, the Dixie fire in California continues to rage after it first started 33 days ago. It grew by more than 15,000 acres on Sunday, making it the largest single-source wildfire in California history. And a California City Council member and 5 other individuals are being charged with election fraud. This marks at least the second time LA County prosecutors have uncovered an attempt to manipulate votes during the 2020 election cycle. That and more on NTD News.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. Over the last 12 years, you've helped MyPillow create thousands of jobs right here in the USA.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
That's why I invented MyPillow. My patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs and helps keep your neck supported and aligned. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm gonna pass the savings directly on to you. For example, you get my 6-piece towel sets, regular $109.99, now only $44.98, or MyPillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit MyPillow.com.
Navigating a world of economic madness, you need to have the right guide. What do today's decisions mean for your tomorrow? We ask why
What's the alternative? Uncover the deeper reasons and the hidden influences, and highlight the real opportunities for profit. At NTD Business, we connect the dots for you. Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
How prepared is your family if a tornado shows up at your doorstep, or a flood, or a hurricane? You can't just turn away a natural disaster. That's why it's important to go to ready.gov/plan now. It has the tools and tips you need to make an emergency plan with your family. So if disaster comes knocking, let's go. You'll be ready to help keep your family safe.
It's just a pizza.
Yes. Make a plan today.
Since igniting last month, the Dixie fire has ravaged nearly 867 square miles of land, an area the size of Los Angeles and San Diego combined.
The Dixie fire is now the largest wildfire in California history. As of last Friday, August 13th, it burned through over 540,000 acres of land. It has destroyed over 1,100 structures. Evacuees escaped to nearby towns. Greg Norton from Chester recounted escaping the blaze.
We could see the fire cresting over the mountain on its way into the Chester area. And frantic phone calls to family members who are in the area. We need to get out. Where we were meeting at, and trying to set up rendezvous points where we were going to meet everybody and plan our next move after that.
Others said the hardest part isn't escaping, but going back.
It really hasn't hit me hard yet, but I think it will when I get back in town. And I see all these people that are just totally devastated. It just breaks my heart.
The fire began on July 14th in the Sierra Nevada mountains, about 160 miles northeast of California's capital city of Sacramento. The Dixie fire has been burning for just over 1 month. Almost 10,000 personnel have fought the fire. It is now 31% contained.
A vaccine-related rally turned violent over the weekend as protesters and counter-protesters clashed in Los Angeles. A man was stabbed but has been released from the hospital. Viewers are warned some of the footage may be disturbing. Here's NTD's Eileen Ang with more.
A fight broke out between anti-vaccination demonstrators and counter-protesters in front of Los Angeles City Hall on Saturday. One man was on site as a volunteer to maintain order.
Antifa came down the street, and when they got to the corner, Patriots ran out into the street and got in a fight with Antifa.
Footage shows people punching each other as bystanders gather nearby. People can be heard swearing and chanting USA. Police came in shortly after to disperse the crowd. A man was stabbed and has been released from the hospital as of Sunday. Neither his identity nor the details of his injury were released. An LA radio news reporter was also attacked. In a tweet, he said he was shoved, kicked, and eyeglasses were ripped off, something that's never happened in his 30 years of reporting. No arrests have been made, and an investigation is still ongoing. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
6 individuals are being charged for alleged election fraud in California's Compton City's recent general elections. The current council member was arrested, then released Friday morning in Los Angeles County. Here's NTD's Cynthia Kai with the details.
Compton City Councilman Isaac Galvin and 5 other individuals are being charged with election fraud. Galvin and former candidate Jace Dawson were arrested Friday morning, accused of working together to help Galvin keep the District 2 seat. Galvin ran against Andre Spicer. According to a report by the Los Angeles Times, Galvin won by a single vote, 855 to 854. Galvin and Dawson were summoned to the Fultz Criminal Justice Center on Friday, but pleaded not guilty and were released on their own recognizance. Galvin also faces charges for attempting to bribe a registrar's office employee with intent to influence the election. Kimberly Couch, Tony Morris, Barry Reed, and Reginald Streeter were charged for using false addresses to vote, though were not arrested. In a statement from Los Angeles County Registrar Recorder, County Clerk Dean Logan said, "The records associated with our voting model voter registration records, and vote-by-mail ballots assisted in identifying and substantiating unusual and suspicious activity in the City of Camden's municipal general election. Based on those records and the associated activity, my office immediately notified law enforcement of our concerns and then fully cooperated in the investigation. According to the 2016 certified list of election candidates, Galvin ran for California State Senate, District 35 as a Democrat. Los Angeles County Register Recorder and the District Attorney's Office provided previously published statements in response to NTD's request for a comment. Cynthia Kai, NTD News, California.
Coming up, the U.S. reportedly sent all 3 of its most powerful nuclear submarines into the Pacific Ocean. These vessels are the biggest, most heavily armed, and fastest in the U.S.'s naval fleet. And Amazon is cracking down on 50,000 Chinese sellers. Most of them are suspended for posting fake reviews or using gift cards to exchange for positive reviews. That and more here on NTD News. The U.S. is reportedly deploying all of the most heavily armed, fastest, and biggest nuclear submarines in its naval fleet to the Pacific Ocean. This in a possible show of military strength against China. NTD's Evelyn Lee has the details.
In a rare move, the U.S. reportedly sent all 3 of its most powerful nuclear submarines into the Pacific Ocean, a possible show of naval strength to adversaries like China. In a tweet, the United Service Organizations unofficially confirmed that the USS Seawolf, Jimmy Carter, and Connecticut had set sail from Washington. The United Service Organizations is a corporation that supports members of the U.S. Armed Forces. The submarines are all of the same class, and each of them carries 50 torpedoes. These vessels are the biggest, most heavily armed, and fastest in the U.S.'s naval fleet. A Forbes report explains that normally vessels of the same class take turns deploying, and it's rare for these submarines to be deployed together because it takes a lot of resources. The report says if the U.S. was at war with China, it would need to deploy all 3 vessels, so the U.S. showing its capability like this is a significant move. The U.S. Strategic Command is sounding the alarm on China's rapidly growing military capability.
We are witnessing a strategic breakout by China. Their explosive growth and modernization of its nuclear and conventional forces can only be what I describe as breathtaking. Make no mistake, China's strategic breakout is a cause for action.
Richard made the remark during a speech at the Space and Missile Defense Symposium last week. He warned against judging Beijing's nuclear capability simply based on the difference in stockpile size between China and the U.S.
What matters is they are building the capability to execute any plausible nuclear employment strategy. Then in 2019, the PRC test launched more ballistic missiles than the rest of the world combined.
Richard says Beijing's military buildup also includes construction of over 200 new intercontinental ballistic missile silos. He points out that if you add all this up, what you get is something inconsistent with a minimum deterrence posture. U.S. Strategic Command is a branch under the Department of Defense that oversees strategic deterrence, global strike, and the country's nuclear arsenal. U.S. retail giant Amazon is suspending 50,000 Chinese sellers. That's for reportedly large numbers of fake reviews on its products. Electronics retailer Aukey and wholesaler TomTop are among them. The widespread suspension has dealt a major blow to China's industry, especially the southern province of Guangdong. According to Chinese media, almost half of these Amazon sellers are based there. An industry insider explained this is the 5th time Amazon has suspended sellers from China. And as for revenue, these companies' total losses are expected to hit more than $15 billion. According to Chinese media outlet Caixin, the suspensions mostly target companies who knowingly violate Amazon's policies. That's including some sellers who hire fake clients and post fake reviews. Some have also been known to insert gift cards into their products with notes asking for positive reviews.
One of the biggest pro-democracy groups in Hong Kong announced it is dissolving on Sunday. Its former leaders are now in prison under Beijing's national security law. NTD's Trevor Piper has the story.
A pro-democracy group that organised some of the biggest protests during political upheaval in Hong Kong is dissolving. The Hong Kong Civil Human Rights Front says it can no longer operate. According to local media, the group is facing a police investigation into possible violation of a national security law. Former leaders of the group are currently in jail on charges related to their activism. The Civil Human Rights Front is the organiser of the annual protest march marking the territory's handover to China in 1997. The group is the largest to disband amid a sweeping crackdown on dissent in the region. Earlier last week, Hong Kong's largest teachers' union also disbanded. The crackdown follows Beijing's imposition of the national security law last year. The legislation outlaws secession, subversion, terrorism, and foreign collusion. It was used to arrest more than 100 pro-democracy figures and close pro-democracy newspaper Apple Daily. The crackdown has virtually silenced opposition voices in the city and drawn US sanctions against Hong Kong and Chinese government officials. Trevor Piper, NTD News.
In France, the protests over health passes continue into the 5th consecutive week. A policy analyst believes the grassroots movement will be here long term. And an exhibition on stylish Italian vehicles spanning from the 1950s to the 2010s. It celebrates the work of the Italian automotive pioneer. More on that when we return in just a moment.
You worked hard for your money. You invest in stability for your retirement and your family's future, to build and leave them with something greater. The next unprecedented financial crisis, political misstep, or unstable government can depreciate it all away. It was called the gold standard for a reason, the financial preservation of tomorrow. Diversify your assets against inflation, market volatility, and the unknown with real money. Hedge your wealth with the purest form of money, physical gold and silver. Because any currency printed on paper can be manipulated. What's backing up your IRA? Do what you need to do right now to be prepared with the Reagan Gold Group. Visit now, rggusakit.com, or call us at 866-912-1384. Receive up to $2,500 in free silver coins and a free safe with your new precious metals IRA. Call now.
Doctors and aid workers rushed to get flights to southwestern Haiti today ahead of a looming storm. Hospitals in the devastated area are unable to cope after a major earthquake there killed over 1,400 people and injured thousands more.
Hospitals have been stretched to capacity with some 5,700 more people injured. Thousands of homes and businesses have been destroyed. The 7.2 magnitude earthquake dealt a massive blow to the impoverished nation, still reeling from the assassination of its president Jovenel Moïse last month and facing a severe economic downturn compounded by the pandemic. Southwestern Haiti suffered the most extensive damage, especially the region in and around the seafront town of Lake Caille. Nearby countries have rushed to send desperately needed aid, including Mexico and the Dominican Republic. The U.S. also dispatched a 65-member search and rescue team. A breakdown of law and order cut off access to key roads in the worst hit areas, leaving parts of the island nation in the hands of gangs. Thousands of Haitians spent the weekend sleeping out in the open, despite the looming risk of heavy rains and warnings from local officials about the spread of waterborne diseases. Rescue efforts will be hampered by Tropical Storm Grace, expected to hit Haiti as early as Monday.
Officials say the earthquake destroyed more than 7,000 homes and damaged nearly 5,000. That left some 30,000 families homeless. And Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has called an early election, sending Canadians to the polls on September 20th. That's 2 years earlier than scheduled. He's hoping to win a majority government.
Trudeau visited Governor General Mary Simon on Sunday to ask her to dissolve Parliament and trigger a federal election next month, 2 years ahead of schedule. Simon is the representative of Queen Elizabeth, Canada's head of state. Trudeau had previously pledged to not call an election during the pandemic. Now he says he needs a new mandate.
So the government and indeed Parliament
needs an opportunity to get a mandate from Canadians, to hear from Canadians on how to end this pandemic.
Polls suggest the Liberals will win their third consecutive election, but may not regain a majority in the House of Commons. Trudeau currently has only a minority of seats, leaving him reliant on other parties to govern. The opposition parties have, in recent days, condemned the idea of an early election in the midst of a fourth wave of the pandemic, saying it is not necessary and risky. They describe Trudeau's call as a power grab. Nationally, Liberals would win 35% of the vote, compared with 30% for the main opposition Conservative Party. That's according to a Leger marketing poll from August 12th. NTD Ottawa.
Mexico says it has flown thousands of migrants to the south of their country. Their aim? To disrupt a pattern of repeat crossings at the border.
Under pressure from the U.S. government to contain illegal immigration, Mexico has been quietly flying thousands of migrants to the south of the country to expedite their departure. That's according to migrants and Mexican officials, two of whom said that Mexico has now sent roughly 13,000 people from northern cities to its southern border on about 100 flights, and that some 1,200 people were flown south in the past week alone, figures that have not been previously reported. Video showed a flight carrying dozens of migrants, including children, landing in the southern city of Tapachula last week. Witnesses said Mexican authorities then loaded the migrants onto buses, drove them about half an hour to a remote border crossing, and instructed them to walk across the pedestrian bridge into Guatemala. Mexico's foreign ministry said in a statement it supported a humane migratory system that respected national and international law, and was working with the U.S. to tackle the causes of migration. The migrant flights come as the Biden administration faces increasing criticism over its management of the issue. Apprehensions of migrants on the U.S. southern border with Mexico have surged this year, piling pressure on President Joe Biden and with it the Mexican government to stem the flow of people trying to cross the border.
Anti-health pass demonstrations continued across France for a fifth consecutive weekend. Over 200,000 people took to the streets protesting the country's vaccine mandates. NTD's David Vives has the story.
Protesters marched in cities across France for a fifth consecutive weekend on Saturday, pushing back against rules that force the public to show a COVID-19 health pass for daily activities. Liberty has become one of the slogans shouted by the demonstrators in cities such as Paris, Le Mans and Marseille.
I feel extremely sad that we came to this point. This is something we read in sci-fi novels. It seems like a new form of totalitarianism, something we've never known before.
After a week of leniency from the police, the government has vowed to get tougher on health pass checks and continue to push for the full vaccination of all French. The protesters questioned the efficacy of the vaccine and said the virus is better addressed with treatments and social distancing. They are also worried that there aren't enough studies on potential side effects.
We will never sell our freedom for 1 dose, 2 doses, 3 doses, 4 doses, 5 doses, 6 doses. Do I hear 7? Never, never, never.
Though Saturday was a holiday and a busy travel weekend, people still came out in droves. According to the security minister, 215,000 took part in the demonstrations. But the France Police Union says there were as many as 460,000 people. And some protesters believe this grassroots movement will be a long-term one.
We need to mobilize. We need leaders, people who take initiatives. A lot of people just follow what the government says without asking questions. Unfortunately, our government understands this and knows how to push on us what we disagree with.
Another protest has already been scheduled for the coming Saturday. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
An exhibition of classic cars from the studio of a famous Italian designer is on display in Moscow. It's part of a year of cooperation between Italian and Russian museums. NTD's Arian Pazdar has that story.
Italian vehicles spanning from the 1950s to the 2010s are on display in Moscow. The exhibition is called 100 Years of Italian Style, Cars of Nuccio Bertoni. It celebrates the Italian automotive pioneer.
Everything that Bertone did, every project he worked on, which his designers worked on, his atelier worked on, each of these projects took automotive design a notch higher.
Bertone's alliance with Lamborghini is a highlight. Their cars have become design and engineering legends. The Lamborghini Espada on display was one of the fastest four-seater coupe automobiles of its time.
This is an absolute masterpiece. This car was once dubbed by journalists as a chic living room, capable of accelerating to 155 miles per hour.
Key examples of Bertone's style include the 1954 Alfa Romeo Giulietta Sprint. There were no computers when it came out. Body models were first designed from plaster or wood.
Design in the 1950s was not tied to production. That is, there were no technical specialists involved and so on. There was a pure design, him, his pencil, and his ideas.
The exhibition also includes drawings and photographs. From artists' impression of modern concept cars to decade-old sketches showing the design process of early models. 2021 has been declared the year of cooperation between museums in Italy and Russia.
We are very happy to bring Italian things here for demonstration, while Italians, in turn, can enjoy Russian exhibitions.
The exhibition is being held at the Special Purpose Garage Museum. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Disney is unveiling new costumes and role-play wheelchair cover sets for kids and adults. The company says these adaptive features allow Disney fans to transform into their favorite characters. These costumes have stretch fabric that opens in the back and is wheelchair-friendly. The 2021 costume assortment includes characters from Raya and the Last Dragon, Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas, and Hocus Pocus. And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox. We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.